Organisers Disown Adegboruwa say protests will continue till FG meets demands. Organisers of the #End Bad Governance protests against economic hardship say the nationwide rallies, which entered the second day on Friday, will continue till President Bola Tinubu addresses their demands. Damile Adenola, Director of Mobilization of Take It Back Movement, a non-governmental organization, stated this on Channels Television's The August Protests program on Friday. Protest organizer Damile Adenola. In an interesting twist, Adenola said human rights lawyer Ibinolu Adegboruwa does not speak for his group, though the senior advocate of Nigeria, SAN, had written security agencies to seek protection for them before the rallies. The youth activist said his group won't suspend the 10-day protests, despite Adegboruwa's pleas that the demonstrations be called off, because fifth columnists have infiltrated the rallies to wreak havoc. Adegboruwa. He said the protests might exceed 10 days depending on the response of the government. Adenola said, Ibinolu Adegboruwa is not our lawyer, and he doesn't speak for us. He might have presented himself as the solicitor, but he is not hungry. He is a senior advocate of Nigeria, who lives well. He is not hungry like the people taking over the streets. We are waiting for the government to respond to us and address our demands. And until then, the protests continue, he said, adding that though the demands of protesters have not been addressed, a statement has been made to the government of the day. He said the protests have shown Nigerians they can hold their leaders accountable. Asked whether the protests were being sponsored by anyone, he said the sponsors of these protests were hunger and economic deprivation. Adenola said if the federal government is sincere and concerned with the plights of the people, the president would have addressed the demands of the protesters by now. Youths protest high living cost. On the first and second day of the protests, policemen were seen dispersing the demonstrators, mostly youths, using tear gas, even as civil society organizations, CSOs, condemned the action of the police. The protests turned awry when some hoodlums took advantage of the demonstrations and looted public and private assets. In a bid to curb the looting, violence and other aftereffects of the protests, the Kano, Borno, Yobe, Katsina, Nasarawa, Jigawa and other state governments imposed curfews in volatile local government areas, LGAs, in their states. Some deaths have also been recorded, as claimed by Amnesty International. The Inspector General of Police Kayode Igbetekin said a policeman was murdered, some cops injured, and police stations burnt. Propagated on social media, the nationwide protests against economic hardship started on Thursday, August 1, 2024, and have been scheduled to stretch till August 10 across all states of the Federation, as well as the nation's capital Abuja. Prices of food and basic commodities have gone through the roof in the last months, as Nigerians battle one of the country's worst subsidies and the forex regime. They also want the government to address food shortages, unemployment and wasteful spending by...
Hello and welcome. Our top focus remains in Nigeria, where protests against economic hardships have turned deadly. At least 13 people have been killed in the rallies across the West African nation, as per rights groups, with fears of the death toll mounting further. As per reports, many deaths took place in the Kaduna state, as thousands across Nigeria marched against the rising cost of living. Nigerian security forces fired live ammunition and tear gas to break protests in major cities. Some Nigerian media outlets have reported that the death toll is feared to be higher at around 17, and that people have lost lives in major cities like the capital of Abuja and Kano. In Kano, the country's second largest city, protesters set fire to tires outside the state governor's office, and police responded with tear gas, forcing most of the demonstrators back. Protesters later ransacked and set a digital center of the Nigeria Communications Commission ablaze. They also raided a warehouse near the Kano governor's office. while police fired shots into the air to disperse the looters. A 24-hour curfew was later imposed in the city. Hundreds of protesters also demonstrated in Abuja, the commercial capital, Lagos, and several other cities. People chanted slogans against President Bola Tinubu, calling him a thief. Now, the mass demonstrations comprise mainly of young people demanding an end to poor governance in Nigeria. Inspired by similar rallies in Kenya, they mobilized the protest on social media, using the hashtag End Bad Governance in Nigeria.
You cannot move from point A to point B in this country today without not necessarily breaking your neck. The cost of transport had gone up. You cannot begin to nurse the idea of sending your words to the school in this country right now without not even have to think 100 times.
50 people were killed, while the protest anxiety prompted the Nigerian government, led by President Bola Tinubu, to offer multiple concessions ahead of the rallies. Nigerian lawmakers have passed a bill to double the minimum wage, and the state oil firm announced new jobs for the first time in a decade. Despite this, angry youth turned up in huge numbers. Security officials say the protests have been hijacked by criminals and insurgents.
The IMN members have hijacked this, they are part of this protest, and that is what we have noticed. That is why we are drawing the attention of the public, since that some bad elements are trying to hijack this protest.
Earlier, President Tinubu had warned that the protests would lead to anarchy and said the military would intervene to avert a crisis. Protesters have vowed their rallies will continue in the coming days. Africa's most populous country is struggling with soaring inflation of over 34% and a sharply devalued naira. The prices spiked after President Tinubu ended a costly fuel subsidy and liberalized the currency more than a year ago. Many protesters say they are battling hunger and poverty due to the price rise.
Nothing is actually working in Nigeria anymore. Even as an health worker, I can't fend for my family very well. I can't provide most of the basic needs of my family. Not because I am not hardworking, but because the economy is so bad that money has no value again. When we go to the market, you spend the whole of your salary and even borrow more. So nothing is working.
Will Nigeria be able to contain the violence, or will it head into chaos? Now, for more on this, we have with us Ambrose Igboke, a PhD and global affairs analyst, joining us live from Enugu in Nigeria. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me, Alison.
Yeah. At least 13 people have been killed in the demonstrations across Nigeria. What are the latest details that you have for us?
Today has been more peaceful than yesterday. Yesterday there was a clash between overzealous security agencies and also overzealous protesters. The preparations towards the protest has been that of heated arguments. It has that of threats from government officials. It has been that of threats also from some security agencies. But also some other government officials also have some reconciliatory approach to it, some engaged. The problem has been that instead of telling people not to come out, the government would have prepared in a different way for the protests. I did recommend some days ago that what would have been better would have been the government to engage with these people. Instead of telling them not to come out, you can reach an agreement, say, okay, let's prevent the issues of the protests being hijacked or infiltrated by hoodlums or by fifth columnists who are, rioters rather than protesters, like what we saw happen in Kano. What the government would have done was to provide places. For example, the FCT minister came out to say that the popular Eagle Square in Abuja, the Eagle Square for them, and then provide the adequate security so that that would have contained them in a place. But where it seems we have not been able to learn how to manage protests over time.
Right. Ambrose, on that, the Nigerian troops and police have tightened security in major cities in response to the protests. This, of course, reflects the heightened tensions. What are the security forces doing to ensure the protests remain peaceful?
There are a lot of intelligence gathering going on, which we are aware of, and also there have been also a lot of engagements. For example, one of the states in Nigeria, Edo State, and some other states, we saw the police commissioners there, talking to the protesters, and they were having some engagements. The same thing, like the chief of defense staff just some few minutes ago, that's 15 minutes ago, ended a press conference with the media where he briefed the media that the military is on standby in case the situation gets out of hand. And we don't pray that it gets to that point, but he just had a briefing with the media community. Also, a lot of states, like in Bayelsa State yesterday, the governor had a deal with the protesters that, okay, you're allowed to protest, we'll give you the cover and the security. Meanwhile, your right to protest should not infringe on the right of freedom of movement of other citizens. So therefore, workers went to work in Bayelsa State and other states yesterday. Protests took place, and it was peaceful. So I think it was the approaches by the different states and different claims that caused the clashes. What happened in Kano, Maiduguri, and some other places were infiltration from people, from hoodlums who caused riots, who focused on looting, rioting instead of having protest. I think it's a failure of intelligence, and it's a failure of security for that not to be nipped in the bud.
Now, the hashtag End Bad Governance in Nigeria movement seeks an end to police brutality, improved human rights, and stable economic policies. What are the reasons that have pushed Nigerians to protest?
I think what you mentioned earlier, the first you mentioned in terms of police brutality, was what did the last protest, which was called the NSAS protest that happened in 2020. This one was focused more on the economic issues and the issues of governance, the issue of hyperinflation, the issue of insecurity, the issue of hunger, and then the issue of there are not even pragmatic templates to even call this thing. Because the government on their side, I would say, oh, be patient with us. We are just putting things in place to make sure that we get these things sorted out. But many Nigerians are not even seeing the pragmatic templates towards this. So it's out of hopelessness. A lot of people cannot get job. Unemployment rate is very, very high. So a lot of people are dying every day because they couldn't afford basic medicine. So it is a very dire situation, and that is what is being protested against. So in the backdrop of this going forward, I think the government should be able to now sit down and be able to, leave this paradigm, make a paradigm shift outside the things they have been doing. It's not enough to say you are sending 10 trucks of rice or grain to a full state and say that will solve the problem. So this slapstick method of problem solving should stop. There should be more focused and agendaed economic policies that will make sure that we have reprieve in the immediate and then have some plans for the midterm.
Right. And Ambrose, the concessions that Bola Tinubu has already made have not really done much to quell the anger in the nation. What are the protesters demanding, and what options are available to the Nigerian government now?
The concessions are more cosmetic, that they don't address the root cause of the problem. The root cause of this problem is the hyperinflation, which was ushered in by the removal of fuel subsidy that was done in May 29, 2023, which was last year. And the increment in fuel from 165 to 240. By July, it increased to 600, July of last year. And this also followed by the floating of the naira. And these things were done without adequate measures of safeguards. And that was the problem. There were no cushioning effects set aside for this. And so these are the things. So it's not what government has offered by increasing the labor salary. How many Nigerians are in the workforce of the government? Because most of these increments only affect government parastatals and the big blue chip companies. Most of the SMEs cannot pay those. So the cost of living is the main thing, that the cost of living should come down. And whatever you do, be it borrowing money from the World Bank to pay to give 50,000 to poor families, or sending buying CNG buses to alleviate transportation, or to send trucks loads of grains to states they are just cosmetic solutions. Nigerians need more solutions. For example, how does the price of petrol come down? That's what Nigerians want. How do food prices come down?
Yeah.
How does electricity tariff come down? So these are the things the government should be looking at and stop these cosmetic approaches they are using.
Yeah. Ambrose, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Africa.
Thank you, Alison, for having me on the show.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Okason the Journeyman TV. And ring the bell so you never miss any of our videos with the latest information, news, and adventures coming. We've got more exciting journeys coming up for you.